Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Nostalgia. Today, we're talking about one of America's most loved and hated brands. There's been a lot of buzz around this store, and for better or for worse, its enduring impact because of the recent Netflix documentary White Hot: The Rise and Fall of Abercrombie and Fitch. My favorite quote from the movie was, I believe, in the opening credits. It says, "There's a reason why people like that brand. It's because exclusion is a part of our society." So the reviews of the doc basically said it lacked substance and that it didn't tell us anything we didn't already know, which I do have to agree with, especially after hearing on fellow pop culture podcaster Danny Pellegrino's episode of Everything Iconic that Alison Klayman, the director of the doc, said that she didn't shop there or have a relationship with the culture. So while this podcast episode is not going to be a review of the documentary, I will share my reaction to it, and I will mostly draw from my firsthand experience with this brand as an adolescent, a former employee of the company, LOL, and as a former fashion industry worker. So I will be talking from a nostalgic and broad cultural perspective, which is the POV of the documentary. But we're also going to look at things through a more granular fashion industry lens about consumer behavior, trends, etc., because that's my professional background. Yeah, if you're watching on YouTube, you might be able to see I'm wearing my um, navy blue graphic tee with white Abercrombie and Fitch lettering vertically down the side of it. This was from circa 2008, like very cool. I just made a TikTok about this podcast episode. This is not like the normal thing I wear. Okay, if you like examining pop culture through a contemporary lens, you're in the right place. And if you missed last week's episode, Juicy Couture, Junie and Bork, and 2000s Girls' First Designer Bags, make sure you go, watch, or listen. Also, don't forget to subscribe, follow, rate, review on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere you listen to podcasts. Also, if anyone listening out there is coming out with a pop culture documentary, I am available for comment. One of my friends was like, "Why weren't you in the Abercrombie documentary?" And I'm like, that's a fantastic question. So we'll see. We'll put it on the vision board. We'll put it in the Mind movie. Like I said last week, if you told me I'd start a podcast and be talking about the fashion industry, I'd be like, yeah, probably not. But if you said, well, actually, it's about when you ran a stop sign on your way to work, but got out of a ticket because you were wearing a tank top and booty shorts, AKA your work uniform as an 18-year-old, I'd be like, oh, got it. That tracks. So here's how it's going to go today. We're going to talk about my personal experience in the store and comments on mall slash brand slash selling culture. Two, how the hell they managed to successfully rebrand after being a complete dumpster fire. Why traumatized millennials and unknowing Gen Z alike still buy their clothes there now in 2022, and then what A&F's goals are going forward and how to decide if companies like these with a little bit of a dark past are worth supporting with your money now as a consumer. I keep going like this because it's like I had to have the on brand hair, which I will talk about brand in a moment. That's the whole thing. Disclaimer. While I will talk about, quote, the way things were and the racism, misogyny, homophobia, elitism, and so many other harmful systemic issues that the fashion industry and specifically Abercrombie has perpetuated, it doesn't mean I condone them. It's among the reasons I left the industry, but I fully acknowledge that I've benefited from these systems indirectly and directly as someone who fit the description of their American dream and who got a paycheck from them. So I'm not here to praise them. I'm not here to bash them. I can just provide context so that you can make that decision for yourself. So, first off, the cultural points. Okay, mall culture, brand culture, and selling culture or lack thereof. Typical setup in a mall. Usually we have department stores, right? Those are called anchors at the end. There are kiosks. There's usually a food court. And what kind of brings it all together is the presence of specialty shops, which means the store sells a particular product category of merchandise or satisfies a particular consumer aesthetic. So the doc mentions, okay, surfers, you have PacSun. Goth, you have Hot Topic. Skater, I don't know, Vans. You have sexy Victoria's Secret, quirky Delia's, which of course you may know is my favorite. And A&F was the preppy ideal. A&F's the parent company and the umbrella under a few different brands. So obviously, Abercrombie and Fitch, Abercrombie Kids, Hollister, Gilly Hicks. And I was actually interested to find out that Hollister makes up the majority of the company's sales in present day. So in 2021, 58% of total net sales for Abercrombie and Fitch's parent company was from Hollister, and then 42% was Abercrombie. What? You didn't like go through all of their financials like me? Okay. So, if you've never been in a Gilly Hicks, it was just this massive store. The one that I worked at is now not one, but two Foot Lockers next to each other, which is kind of odd now that I think about it. But anyway, it's similar to if like Abercrombie and IKEA had a baby. Like there were at least 10 rooms that you probably got lost in or lost your mom in. It was very dark, very loud, and very fragrant. Now it's a Hollister, what they call a carve out or like a store in store with, to my knowledge, no longer any freestanding locations of its own. And it's also targeted at Gen Z now, as is their brand Social Tourist, which I never heard of until today, in collaboration with the D'Amelio sisters, which I feel like is random, but okay. With Hollister too, it's interesting because some people don't know they're the same company. They kind of divided the affordable preppy segment, so people didn't realize there was actually kind of a monopoly here, right? And when I say affordable preppy, I mean clothes that could potentially be purchased with a teenager's disposable income or allowance, in contrast to higher end preppy brands like Ralph Lauren, Brooks Brothers, or even J. Crew. We had magazines, right? The end of the monoculture, like we also talked about last week, when we were all given just this very narrow set of ideals, very clear rules about what was acceptable, very specific archetypes and stereotypes to play into, and we did. A&F is inextricably linked with mall culture of the 90s and 2000s. So what made them appealing is that they did reach middle America. They hired small town people. So you could kind of play off of all of the different teen tropes that you saw in movies, but instead of idolizing a celebrity, it'd be like the popular guy at your high school or the frat boy at your local college. So I got into this scene the same way that everyone did. I got recruited. You had to be 18 to work there, and it was literally a week before my 18th birthday. I was in Gilly Hicks in the West Farms Mall in Central Connecticut with my mom and was approached by a rep. So I got paid minimum wage, and my job title was model as opposed to impact, the people in the stockroom. I would literally just stand there, fold things, dance to the 4-hour disco playlist that played on a seemingly infinite loop. I actually love the songs and ended up making my managers the exact playlist in our store on a burned CD as a parting gift, which is actually pretty impressive, seeing as this was before Shazam existed. And now I've also made a Spotify playlist. I will definitely link it in the show notes. I also made the album cover because, yes, it was literally a mix CD with a jewel case with the customized artwork. I mean, above and beyond. Come on. I made the album cover reflect the photography that was in the store at the time. So it was like one girl in underwear amongst a lineup of shirtless men. And like we worked at an underwear store, so it totally made sense, right? So the photography, aesthetic, and the visual representation of the brand was everything. And seeing the documentary too really made me think about the overtly gay lens through which the brand was shown, despite the brand being the actual representation of internalized and externalized homophobia, misogyny, and policing of young people's bodies under the guise of being arbiters of style. And the doc even makes mention that somebody who put together the quarterly, which was their like highly provocative quarterly catalog that would come in the mail, didn't even realize Abercrombie's exclusionary role until he saw Peter Parker's bully in the Spider-Man movie wearing it from head to toe. The doc also makes mention of several insidious, creepy, predatory, very rich, very powerful men who started, financed, shaped, and just propagated this whole culture, which really ran in tandem with the diet culture of the 90s and 2000s. Something else that kind of jogged my memory when watching this doc was like in Gilly Hicks, there were books everywhere with like erotic male photography. With that and with Abercrombie's depiction of its models, it's actually scary how problematic things that happened not very long ago were. So, I mean, on one hand, it seems like kind of forever ago. I'm kind of shocked that 2008 was 14 years ago, right? So I worked there from April 2008 through August 2008, went to college, came back over winter break, and the store was completely turned over. So turnover is when people quit and they hire new people. So all new people in the store. This was post consent decree, post class action lawsuit that was settled for $48 million at the time when what is described in the documentary as, quote, the fatigue is happening. So it's basically like they have no guilt or remorse about their past actions. There's really no accountability. And despite having hired their chief diversity officer, not much shifted. I would say when I got hired was much more of like that tokenism era, which was mentioned kind of as a double-edged sword in the doc, right? So if you're partnering with historically Black colleges and universities to recruit, are we opening the door and taking the first step toward change? Or are we just continuing to hire people based on racial quotas? Maybe both. In terms of their brand standards, I wish I saved my old employee handbook because it was the first time I saw a word that would be repeated ad nauseum at, I would say, two of the four fashion companies I would go on to work for over the next 12 years. That was brand. Being brand or being on brand was a term used in recruitment and HR to filter out applicants based on their looks or likeness. With and without saying this meant pretty, thin, and white. The brand book would say certain things were and weren't acceptable, like nail polish, piercings, and things that were obviously speaking to Black people. Dreadlocks, do-rags, acrylic nails. You also had to be conventionally good looking. You couldn't wear a lot of makeup. And when they say natural hair, they mean natural straight hair, not natural textured hair. I had gotten my nose pierced. It was 2008. And they were so pissed. I went to Hot Topic, bought a clear nose ring, cut the ball off the end, and kind of just like positioned it in my nose so it wouldn't close up, but also so that I was still on brand. And they were like, "You took your ring out, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely." So, anyway, it was like you knew that discriminatory practices as such and internal theft, which is employee stealing merchandise and cash, like everybody knows that's wrong. But since they hired like 18-year-olds, there was always really this sense that there was nothing you could do about it. And if this behavior, a lot of it's top down, right? So when your store got a visit, you just really wanted to impress higher ups. And sometimes they would, say, "Oh, we're taking pictures to send them to headquarters." It's like you did want to look your best. And in retail too, usually it's at will employment. So if you don't like what the company does, you can leave. You can leave at any time. And even to this day, about 80% of ANF's workforce is part time. So that's really a labor structure that very much supports that swinging door kind of culture. I personally always had a lot of hours. One, because, and this is terrible, but it's because I was someone they could put up in the front of the store, but also because people would call out constantly and I would just want the money to cover their shift. Something else they mentioned in the documentary I thought was interesting was an employee who had left Abercrombie to go to American Eagle. And I had done the same. I did end up leaving Gilly Hicks to go work for not American Eagle, but a brand under their parent company. I've actually worked at three different brands under AEO, except for American Eagle itself. And the culture was different, mostly that it was more sales driven, like an actual business rather than a popularity contest. But for Abercrombie, it wasn't about sales. It was the only place I think I ever worked where I never knew what the sales goal was for that day. It only mattered how you looked, to be totally honest. And people were replaceable. Again, this was after the discrimination lawsuit. So I didn't even know any of that happened at the time. And in the early 2010s, Abercrombie didn't just start declining because they were being held accountable for their actions. It was because everyone was on the decline. The economic crisis in 2008 sent stores into what would become the retail apocalypse of the 2010s. So dozens upon dozens of brands filing for bankruptcy, shuttering thousands of stores. This effect was exacerbated by the advent and the normalization of, right, online shopping. There was now a pressure for an e-commerce presence, and that's a difficult transition for a brand like Abercrombie, whose brand is like the equivalent of the cool kids letting you sit at their table at lunch, right? The internet democratized access to cool, so it wasn't cool anymore. Also, it was the advent of body positivity and sizing inclusivity, something that was the antithesis of A&F's hot people only ethos. Sidebar, I did work for pre-Airy Real Airy. So before all of the campaigns that they're known for today. And I have to say, that's one place that I can look back and be like, wow, I'm proud of that. I can't say at store level I had a great experience, but in general, the company was great. And the other brands that I worked for, I had awesome coworkers. Okay, back to ANF. Their stock fell in the early to mid 2010s to its lowest point since May 2000. So over 10 years being a public company. Here's one of the problems. The former CEO was still paying himself $40 million a year. And with your stock under $10 per share, okay, even if you don't know the stock market, that's like very low. He was getting sued by shareholders. And there was this really, like I was just saying, we really didn't know about like this crazy stuff that was going on with the company. The really explosive piece about the company written back in 2006 for Salon Magazine stated that it was exclusionary. It was like that article that's like, we don't want like uncool people shopping with us. We only want skinny people. We only want hot people, etc. That info was like out there. That article was out for years. But you have to remember, in the 2000s, we did not have access to or consume or even discover information in the same way that we do now with social media and with the internet in its current state, right? No one even heard of this article until 2013, which the doc mentions this as well. A Change.com petition came out to extend sizing and it went viral on Twitter. And then that's when Business Insider wrote the article about them and like all this stuff. And so 2013 was really like the lowest point. Another cultural marker of this is when Jersey Shore's Mike, the Situation, sued Abercrombie and Fitch when they came out with a t-shirt with the phrase the Fitchuation. And they had said in a press release they would pay him $10,000 if he would not wear A&F clothing on the show. And people are like, oh, yeah, I get it now. This clothing's trash. So major shifts really started happening when the former CEO left in 2014. And this thing called the Office of the Chairman of the company was formed to allow for that transition in leadership. And then that, office, whatever, board, whatever it was, dissolved in 2017 when this woman who she was the brand president of Hollister, and then she was the president and chief merchandising officer for all of the brands of the company. In 2017, she was appointed as chief executive officer, principal executive officer, and director, which, what a job title. But anyway, once she stepped in, that is when you saw like the really big shift, right? So this is 2017. This is how Abercrombie and Fitch successfully rebranded. They leveraged their strengths. Sounds simple, right? They tapped into what they did really well, which was recruiting. So their ability to get brand ambassadors evolved seamlessly as that grassroots kind of effort turned into what we now know as influencer marketing. I was actually kind of shocked the first time I saw a hashtag sponsored ad by Abercrombie because it was from an influencer acquaintance of mine who did not at all fit the 2000s, the 90s Abercrombie look. And she was tapped for this partnership. That's when I knew that they were really taking this rebrand seriously. And their other strength was their aesthetic consistency. So they had to change all of that around as well, right? So for the rebrand, they turn up the lights, they turn down the music, they streamlined the logos, any kind of brand identity markers, and they wiped their social pages clean in order to really set the tone. And speaking of the tone, the communications and the positioning of the brand was so key. They completely changed their brand narrative. It's very politically correct. It's kind of manipulative, but it's highly effective. Okay, so what do I mean? In the 90s and 2000s, if you went and asked somebody, okay, what is Abercrombie, or like what do they represent, what's Hollister, etc., for Abercrombie you'd be like, it's a store for like hot skinny white popular kids through a preppy Americana lens. And Hollister, it's a store for hot skinny white popular kids through a preppy Californian lens. And Gilly Hicks was a store for hot, skinny, white, popular girls. So these are the brand's reworked about statements as of 2021. So this is how the company describes itself. And this is the information that it gives about its brands to shareholders, right? Gilly Hicks invites everyone to embrace who they are underneath it all. Hollister creates carefree style designed to make all teens feel celebrated and comfortable in their own skin. Abercrombie & Fitch inspires our global customers to feel confident, be comfortable, and face their fears. For one of the most problematic, blatantly discriminatory companies out there to say that they embrace, celebrate, and feel comfortable about, or they encourage customers to feel those things about themselves, that's good marketing. You have to remember too, the fashion industry is not based on ethics. Like the point isn't to be good, sustainable, or inclusive. The point is to sell clothes and make money. Something else that was super smart was that they grew with their customer. So instead of going straight for Gen Z, how old was Gen Z in 2017? 20? 20 and younger? They still targeted millennials who are now young professionals who had gained a little bit of buying power. And the reason that traumatized millennials and unknowing Gen Z alike still buy their clothes now in 2022 is because fashion packages the idea of belonging. Most people never work through their like deep-seated insecurities and they feel like, wow, I couldn't wear A&F back then, but now I can. Oh, that person never liked me, but maybe now they could. That person would never have given me the time of day in high school, but now it might be different. Like it's closure. It's That's what it feels like, even though the only real way I think that you get closure is through self-acceptance, not external validation. And the thing about younger generations, it's that they inhabit whatever world we've created for them. That's why they're so resentful of their parents and they call millennials old on TikTok, but they literally copy and co-opt every single thing that people did 20 years ago. So that's pretty interesting. Okay, in terms of their goals moving forward, there are a few. Number 1, become omnichannel. 2, expand in Europe and Asia. 3, grow Gilly Hicks. 4, leverage data to make faster business decisions. I forgot, what is this, 5 or 6? Revisit their store presence, so it's more like quality over quantity, and to stay competitive without crazy ass discounts. So in case you're like, what's omnichannel? I'm glad you asked, because innovation through leveraging progressively integrated retail technology and systems is like my favorite thing to talk about. So let's say you have a store in the mall, right? You have the store, you go, you shop there. That is a single channel. Let's say you have a store, brick and mortar, that's what they call it, like in the mall, in person, IRL, and you have online, you have e-commerce. That's multi-channel. That means there's multiple ways that your customer can buy the product. Omnichannel means that those two methods speak to one another, right? So there's an integration between IRL and digital. I mean, we've been working on omnichannel projects for over 10 years, since like the early 2010s, at least in my career. And to see Abercrombie like still addressing these things, it's super interesting. I'm not going to go and say this is like innovative. I'm saying this is kind of like catching up at this point. Because customers' expectations about their integrated shopping experience have evolved very rapidly, especially over the past 2 years, now in the 2020s. So some omni-channel methods, buy online, pickup in store, or as I lovingly call BOPIS, curbside pickup, order in store. So if they don't have it at my mall, they could order it online for me, reserve in store. So I could go put it on hold and try it on before I buy it. Ship from store. So if they don't have it at my mall, they can find it at a different store that does, or cross channel return. So if I buy something online, I would have the ability to return it in the store. So, in addition to those omni-channel practices, I think it was really interesting to see about their expansion in Europe and Asia, especially as the company has had such like an American filter over it. And especially with the discriminatory practices, it's like if you have stores in Asia, you do have to hire Asian people. So that will be interesting to see how they are able to kind of reshape their culture so that it transcends borders and is able to resonate in a more positive way. Let's see. Oh, and revisiting their store presence, they removed 1.7 million gross square feet globally since 2017. I thought that was crazy. So basically, when you have a store, one of the ways they note if like a store or a mall is successful, or like the level, the caliber of mall, right? It's the sales per square foot. So the idea is that the bigger your store, like the more money it makes, and that you really want more of like a quality over quantity. However, in the mall booms, the 80s, the 90s, even the 2000s, there were stores opening in the mall like at an insane rate. And then once the retail apocalypse of the 2010s hit, everybody's going for bankruptcy, everybody's closing hundreds of stores. Like it was wild. So they're really going to revisit their store presence and like what does our presence look like? They closed A&F at the West Farms Mall and everyone was so surprised, but it's like a lot of their stores were just not making the kind of money that they needed to. And as these malls continue to evolve themselves, Abercrombie needs to assess its leases and be like, what's just kind of dead weight versus like what's really going to make us more profitable. And let's see. In addition, they talk about their human capital resources. Okay, so again, they're a publicly traded company. They have all of this information available right on their website for investors and people like me who are interested in reading this stuff. Anyway, so what does that mean? They want to offer competitive compensation and benefits. So I would imagine this means paying people more than minimum wage and giving them health insurance, improving associate engagement. So I'm saying I imagine this because I don't actually know if these things happen at a store level, but I'm assuming it means developing their employees internally so they can grow within the company. They also noted encouraging community involvement as well as embracing diversity and inclusion in all forms, including gender, race, ethnicity, disability, nationality, religion, age, veteran, LGBTQIA plus status, and other factors. They continuously review representation, pay, and promotion among associates with diverse backgrounds, including those in senior leadership positions. That's literally what they said. Like, those are their direct, exact words, not mine. And I'm pretty sure their entire exec board is white, but Rome wasn't built in a day. So, in evaluating where you want to shop, here's what to consider. Okay. Number one, do I have any particular ethics? This could be about sustainability, diversity and inclusion, fair labor practices, etc. Like, think about what you believe in. And then you have to consider, what do I value the most in a shopping experience, right? Price, convenience, the company culture, the legacy, the heritage. What means the most to you? This is like when people say, oh, I would rather buy one really nice shirt for $50 than 10 kind of crappy shirts for $5. What what kind of stance are you willing to take? I think for me, this has been super tricky because fast fashion, like just when we didn't think it was going to get any worse, it did, right? And so being able to kind of draw these lines, and it's not black and white, and it's not like there's tons of contradictions. And I think something else is you have to ask yourself, am I willing to not shop somewhere if they do something I don't like? Am I willing to be what seems like the only person who doesn't shop somewhere, even if everyone else does? Are you okay with having TikTok Shein haul FOMO? Because I'm okay with that. That's one of the lines that I've drawn for myself. Am I willing to shop somewhere that has been, quote, canceled? I think most importantly, am I willing to understand that no brand is perfect? Brands will always make mistakes, and it's not necessarily a brand's responsibility to uphold your ethics or values. Nonprofits, charities, and philanthropic endeavors can do that, but the inherent nature and purpose of a business is to make money, not to make the world a better place. Listen, I'm a very optimistic person, but like, let's be real, okay? I'm always going to serve you with the real talk. So think about those questions. We've talked about a lot today. Phew. So, yeah, that just about wraps it up. But please remember to subscribe, follow, rate, and review Nostalgia on your favorite podcast platform. We are growing, and it means a lot to share the ultimate goal of this pod with more people. It's to unlock these core memories, it's to bring people together, it's to make them feel like a part of something. And this episode makes you think too. I said last week when we talked about handbags, and I will say it again as we talk about a historically exclusive clothing brand, your worth is not based on what you wear. You matter. And the logo on your polo, actually, your double pop collar polo, doesn't. Before we go, I will show you a few quick pictures of me on the job. Working for this company in 2008. If you are listening, I am in my uniform of either a navy blue short sleeve shirt, or they had two layered. Like we couldn't just wear one tank top also because it was like completely see-through, but like we would wear two navy blue tank tops, and how it goes all the way down. Everything was tunic, everything was so long. It looked so weird. And then we would either wear sweatpants, but like tight sweatpants, or sweat shorts with, of course, matching navy flip-flops. It was such a vibe. It was such a moment. It was so interesting. What a time to be alive, right? Okay. Thanks so much, babes. See you next time.